Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Ooh, it's going to be a deep one today.
We're going to be tackling
Okay.
some excerpts from
Okay.
the Understanding by Design Guide to Creating High-Quality Units
Mm-hmm.
by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to explore how this framework
Got it.
can help us ditch those check-the-box teaching methods
Right.
and design learning experiences that prioritize genuine understanding and transfer. You know, the
Yeah.
kind of learning that sticks with students beyond the
Right.
classroom.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we all want,
For
right?
sure.
To see that learning actually have an impact.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's so
Mhm.
interesting about this book
Yeah.
is that it really directly addresses this common frustration
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of us have as both learners and as
Yeah.
educators.
Yeah.
Where you sort of have this feeling of like,
Mhm.
okay, I learned something in class,
Yeah.
but then when I actually need to use it,
Yeah.
like, it's not there.
It's gone.
Yeah, exactly. And Wiggins and McTighe really call this out. They talk about the pitfalls of activity-oriented teaching and content coverage, where they're
Right.
saying that often these approaches, they
Yeah.
end up prioritizing that surface-level engagement
Right.
over really deep
Yeah.
transferable knowledge.
It's that did we really get it
Right.
question.
Exactly. And I know for me, I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to this in my own experiences. Like, I remember countless times cramming for a test,
Oh, yeah.
acing it, and then a week later,
Right.
poof, totally gone.
Yeah.
So how does UBD Understanding by Design
Yeah.
propose we tackle?
But they have this idea of backward design, and that's really the core of it. Instead of starting with, your textbook or activities, you start with the end in mind.
Oh,
Just
interesting.
like planning a road trip. You
Okay.
don't just hop in the car and go.
Right.
You decide where you're going to
Yeah.
map it out,
Yeah.
and then you pick the best stops along the way.
Yeah.
So it's about being intentional.
So instead of aimlessly driving through the
Exactly.
curriculum,
That's
we're being
right.
intentional about where we're going with those learning outcomes.
It's about that destination. What do we want students to actually walk away with?
Okay, I'm liking this analogy. So that's stage one, Christianizing the what of learning. But how do we make sure
No, that's the thing.
students are getting there?
Right, right.
How do we make sure they're not just memorizing facts,
Yeah.
but they're really internalizing,
Exactly. We want that deep understanding,
connecting with the material?
not just surface level stuff.
Okay.
So that brings us to stage two,
Right.
which is all about figuring out
Yeah.
how do we know they got it?
Okay.
What's the evidence?
Interesting.
And that's where we get into assessment.
Yeah.
But it's not just about quizzes and tests.
Okay.
We have to think more broadly
Got it.
about what shows true understanding.
Right.
So it's not just
It's not just can they spit the facts back to me,
exactly.
but can they actually apply this knowledge,
Yes, can they use it?
analyze,
They think critically.
demonstrate that they really
It's about the depth of their
Really.
understanding.
Okay. So we've got the what
Mhm.
and the how do we know,
Right.
but how does UBD guide us? And then well,
Okay, so that's where stage three comes
so
in.
crafting those learning experiences
Right.
that lead to this deep understanding.
That's where we actually design the learning plan. So
Yeah.
figured out our destination. We know
Yeah.
we'll know we're there.
Right.
Now it's about mapping out the journey.
Okay.
Choosing those engaging stops along the way.
So that's where the real creativity comes in.
Exactly. You still have all that freedom to be innovative.
Okay.
But it's all connected to those goals.
So it's not just random activities. It's,
Right. It's all purposeful. It all leads somewhere.
It's like a scaffolding to
Exactly.
support really effective teaching
Yeah.
without limiting creativity in the
Yeah.
classroom.
And one thing I think is really cool about UBD
Okay.
is how it breaks down
Yeah.
learning goals into these four types.
Okay, tell me more about these
Right. So
four
for
types of learning goals.
we've got the foundation,
Okay.
the knowledge and skills.
Mhm.
These are kind of like your building blocks.
Yeah,
Knowledge is about the facts, the basic concepts.
got it.
And skills are about,
Yeah.
being able to do specific tasks.
Okay, so that's the what and the how of
Yeah, you've got it.
understanding.
But UBD doesn't stop there.
Right. I have a feeling it takes us deeper.
It does. It goes
What's
further.
that?
Yeah. It pushes us to think about meaning making and transfer.
Okay, now we're getting
Okay, so meaning making is about,
to the good stuff.
yes, it's about helping students connect the dots,
Okay.
understand the why behind the facts.
I like that.
That's about drawing inferences,
Yeah.
making connections, explaining things in their own words.
So it's not just a jumble of facts.
Exactly. It's about weaving those threads together
It's weaving it all together.
into a tapestry of understanding.
I love that. And then we have this idea of transfer.
Yes. Transfer. This is the ultimate goal.
Okay, tell me more about
All right. So this is about,
transfer, because I think this
Yeah.
is what we all as educators are striving for.
we want to see it in action.
Absolutely.
So transfer is about
okay.
going beyond just what's in the textbook.
Yeah,
It's about students being able to apply what they've learned
right.
in different situations in the real world,
Okay.
even outside the classroom.
You mentioned earlier that driver's ed.
Yeah, that's a classic example.
It's a great example of that.
Right. It's not just about passing a test. It's
Right.
about being a safe driver out there on the roads.
Yeah. What are some other examples
Well, imagine a science class
of transfer and
where students aren't just memorizing cell parts,
Yeah.
but they're designing experiments
Yeah.
to test how pollution affects plants.
Yeah.
Or in history, instead of just dates and names,
Mm-hmm.
they're analyzing primary sources
Right.
to make arguments about historical events.
So they're using that knowledge
Exactly.
to solve
They're problem solvers.
real problems.
It's authentic.
That's really cool. So these 4 types of learning goals,
Yeah.
knowledge, skills, meaning making,
Yeah.
and transfer,
It's a framework for designing really powerful learning experiences.
they really give us a framework for designing those engaging and effective learning experiences.
And then
Okay.
to bring it all together,
Yeah.
we have these things called essential questions.
Essential questions. Okay.
They're not your typical what, when, where questions.
Oh.
They're open,
And so they're more like
Yeah.
big, overarching questions.
big, thought-provoking questions
Got it.
that invite inquiry
Yeah.
and spark curiosity.
That's really cool.
So it's about getting students to think deeply.
I see the power in that.
Yeah.
But I can also imagine that
Right.
for students who aren't used to
Right. It can be a shift.
that kind of open-ended inquiry,
It's important to scaffold,
it could be a little overwhelming.
provide support.
Yeah, that's a good
We
point.
can introduce them gradually,
Yeah.
model how to grapple with them, maybe
Mhm.
give them sentence stems or graphic organizers.
So it's like we're giving them the tools to
Exactly.
be able to really
We're equipping them
wrestle with these
to
questions.
think critically.
Okay.
So those essential questions, they're like a compass
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
analogy.
guiding students through the learning journey.
And as they're wrestling with those questions, they're
Right.
engaging in that meaning making and moving closer to that ultimate goal.
Yes. To transfer.
Transfer.
You got it.
Okay.
This is starting to click for me.
Yeah.
We start with those big picture learning goals.
Uh-huh.
We use those essential questions to guide exploration.
It's all about that intentional design.
And then along the way, we're weaving in
Yes, and the beauty of UBD
is those opportunities for meaning making and transfer.
it gives you that roadmap.
This has been so insightful.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling
Well, we're just getting started.
we've only just scratched the surface
There's so much more to explore,
of what UBD has to offer.
especially when it comes to assessment and teaching for transfer.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
Okay.
We'll dive into those in our next segment.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked about how UBD helps us design purposeful learning experiences.
Right.
But how do we make sure that we're actually teaching
I'd
for
like to just
genuine understanding
Mhm.
and not just
not just the surface stuff.
like surface level
They want the depth.
knowledge?
Yeah. How do we make sure it goes deep? Well, that's where unpacking understandings comes in.
Unpacking understandings. Okay, break that down for me.
So understandings,
Yeah.
they're more than just those isolated facts.
Mhm.
It's about the inferences,
Okay.
the aha, the moments,
Yeah.
those deeper insights that students develop
I like that.
when they're really connecting the dots.
It's like those light bulb moments.
Yes,
So how do
basically.
we actually pinpoint those aha
Yes.
moments?
It starts with identifying those core ideas.
Okay.
What are the big, enduring understandings
Yeah.
that we want them to walk away with?
Got it.
And then we can brainstorm.
Okay.
What are those specific statements?
Right.
And
Yeah.
capture those understandings.
So it's about identifying those key takeaways.
Right. What will really illuminate the topic.
Okay.
But we have to be careful.
Yeah, how do we make sure we're choosing understandings that are
Right.
truly insightful and not just obvious or vague?
That's where the critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
We need to ask ourselves, is this understanding
Yeah.
really thought-provoking?
Mm-hmm.
Does it require students to make connections,
Yeah.
draw inferences, challenge their assumptions?
It's pushing them to think beyond just
Exactly.
the facts.
We want to go deeper.
I love that. But once we've unpacked those understandings,
Okay, so then the question becomes,
how do we actually assess them?
right, how do we measure that?
How do we go beyond those
Right.
traditional multiple choice tests?
Exactly. We need to think about assessment differently.
Okay.
And UBD provides this framework
Okay.
called the 6 facets of understanding.
6 facets of understanding. All right, I'm intrigued.
It's like these different lenses
Okay.
through which students can demonstrate their understanding.
Okay, give me an example. Like, what are
Okay, so remember that American Revolution example we talked about?
some of these facets?
Instead of just asking what caused the American Revolution,
Yeah.
which usually just leads to memorization.
Right, they just spit back the textbook at you.
Exactly. We can design assessments
Yeah.
that tap into different facets.
Okay.
So, for example, we could ask them to analyze the conflict
Yeah.
from both the British and American viewpoints.
Oh, interesting.
That's assessing perspective.
Yeah.
Or we could have them analyze a political cartoon
Okay.
from that era
Yeah.
and explain the message.
So they're really having to interpret
Exactly. They're interpreting
and analyze.
and applying their knowledge
Yeah.
in a different way.
This is moving us beyond just assessing knowledge.
Absolutely. It's about those higher order thinking skills.
And into like higher order thinking.
We want them to analyze, interpret, apply,
Mm-hmm.
but we also want to make sure those assessments are engaging.
Absolutely. So how do we make sure that they're engaging and authentic?
That's where creativity comes in.
And not just another worksheet or test.
Right. Think outside the box.
Okay.
Instead of essays, maybe they create podcasts.
Ooh, I like that.
Design museum exhibits, stage debates.
So they're showcasing their understanding.
Yeah, it's about making it real for them.
In the way that's meaningful and relevant.
And speaking of real-world connections.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about textbooks.
Where do those fit into all of this?
Because I think it's so easy.
It's easy to fall into that trap.
To fall into the trap of letting the textbook.
Right, letting it dictate everything.
Dictate the curriculum.
But UBD encourages us to see it as a resource.
Okay.
Not the curriculum itself.
Got it.
Textbooks are great for building knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
But they don't always get at those deeper understandings.
Right.
So we need to go beyond the textbook.
So it's about being really selective.
Exactly. We need to be intentional.
In how we use the textbook.
Use it as a tool, but don't let it limit you.
And supplementing it with other resources.
Right, and experiences.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about teaching for transfer.
All right, transfer. The Holy Grail.
This feels like one of the trickiest aspects
It can be tricky.
of teaching.
Yeah.
How do we actually equip students to use what they've learned?
It's about bridging that gap
Outside of the classroom walls.
between the classroom and the real world.
Okay.
So one key strategy is to use real-world problems in our lessons.
So that they can see the relevance.
Exactly. When they see the
Well,
connection,
they're learning to their own lives.
they're more likely to internalize it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And make those connections that lead to transfer.
Okay.
And another thing to think about
Yeah.
is providing authentic audiences.
What do you mean by that?
So instead of just writing for the teacher,
Authentic audiences.
maybe they present their work to a community panel.
Okay.
Or create videos to teach their peers.
So it's like giving them a real purpose.
A real purpose, a real audience.
Yeah, word.
It raises the stakes.
I can see how that would really up the engagement level.
Absolutely. And of course, practice is key.
Practice, yeah.
Just like with anything else.
So it's not just about
Right.
teaching a concept once.
It's about repeated practice.
And assuming they can transfer it.
In different contexts.
Yeah. We have to give them those opportunities.
We have to give them opportunities to try it out.
Yeah.
Make mistakes, get feedback.
And to refine their understanding.
Yeah.
But as we're giving them those opportunities, I imagine we need to be mindful of...
We need to scaffold.
Folding.
We start with more support.
Okay.
And then gradually release responsibility.
It's like teaching someone to ride a bike.
Exactly. You start by holding on,
Yeah.
then you let go a little.
And eventually they're off on their own.
And eventually they're riding on their own.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
It's about finding that balance.
It really captures the essence
of support and challenge.
of scaffolding.
And as we guide them towards independence,
Yeah.
we also need to emphasize self-reflection and metacognition.
Okay, unpack those for me.
All right, so metacognition, it's like thinking about thinking.
Okay.
It's about helping students become aware
Mm-hmm.
of their own learning process.
So we can ask them questions like...
Yeah, like what are your strengths as a learner?
Okay.
What are your weaknesses?
Yeah.
What strategies work best for you?
So it's like we're helping them
Exactly.
become their own learning coach.
Become self-directed learners.
Yeah, I love that.
And the cool thing is when students develop those metacognitive skills,
Yeah.
they can take ownership
Yeah.
of their learning.
They can advocate for themselves.
Exactly. They can advocate for themselves.
As learners.
They can adjust their strategies.
I like that.
They become more effective.
So we're explicitly teaching them about these different types of learning.
We're not just assuming they know the difference between
Right.
knowledge, skills,
Yeah.
meaning-making, and transfer.
Got it.
We're making it clear
Yeah.
why it matters.
We're shining a light on it.
Exactly.
This has been so insightful.
Glad to hear it.
I'm really feeling inspired to rethink
Yeah.
my own approach.
And I
to
think the next step is to see it in action,
Yeah.
to see how these principles come to life in a real classroom.
Okay.
So let's look at a concrete example.
Yeah, let's bring it.
And see how UBD can transform a traditional unit plan
A concrete example.
into a learning experience that prioritizes understanding and transfer.
Awesome. I'm excited to see this in action.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so we've spent this deep dive really unpacking some pretty powerful concepts from understanding by design.
It's a rich framework, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots to dig into.
But I'm really eager to see how all of this actually translates.
Yeah, how do we take it from theory to practice?
Exactly. Like, how does this play out in a real classroom?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
So Let's take a look at an example
Okay.
and see how UBD can actually transform a traditional unit.
I like it. Can we revisit that
Abstract.
nutrition unit that we
Yeah, let's go back to that.
Flap touched on earlier?
Remember how the initial draft was so focused on just memorizing?
Yes, it was all about the food groups and the food pyramid.
Right, lots of textbook stuff.
It felt very textbook driven.
It felt a bit dry, didn't it?
Yeah, like a missed opportunity.
Like we were missing that connection
really connect it
to their everyday lives.
to students' lives.
Right, exactly.
So how did UBD help to revamp
Well, first of all, instead of jumping right into the textbook,
this unit?
they started with an essential question.
Okay, I like that already.
And the question was, what does healthful eating look like in my world?
Oh, that's good. That's so much more
Right. It immediately grabs their attention.
engaging than just memorizing food groups.
It makes it personal.
It makes it personal.
It gets them thinking.
Yeah.
And then instead of just lectures and textbook readings,
Okay.
they brought in activities that really get students
Yeah.
engaged in meaning making and
Well,
transfer.
Okay, give me an example.
So, for example, they had this concept attainment lesson on food groups
Okay.
where students are analyzing images of foods and meals.
Oh, cool.
And they have to sort these examples into categories.
So they're figuring it out.
Right, they're constructing their own understanding.
Yeah, instead of just being told.
Absorbing it.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And then to take it even further,
Mm-hmm.
they had this activity where students analyze a hypothetical family's diet,
Okay.
which is, of course, totally unbalanced.
Of course. Gotta have some drama.
Got to make it interesting.
Right.
And working in groups,
Okay.
students have to identify the nutritional problems
Yeah.
and make recommendations for how to improve it.
So they're applying that knowledge
They're using what they know about food groups and healthy eating guidelines.
to a real world scenario.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about knowing the facts.
That's awesome.
It's about applying them.
Yeah.
And while they're working,
Yeah.
the teacher is circulating, observing, offering guidance.
That's where that differentiation comes in.
Right, exactly. Meeting students where they are.
So we're making sure all students are
Absolutely.
challenged and supported.
That's the goal.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot more emphasis on real-world application
It's all about making those connections.
in this EB-inspired unit.
Yeah, bringing it to life.
What other activities
Well, one that I thought was really cool
really showcase that shift?
was they had students create these illustrated nutrition brochures.
Oh, wow.
And their audience was younger children.
So they have to think about how to communicate.
Right? They have to analyze their audience.
Yeah.
Think about what's important to share.
And make it engaging.
Exactly. So many different skills involved there.
I love that. And what about
I remember that culminating performance task.
that culminating performance
The
task?
Chow-down challenge.
Yes, the chair down challenge.
In the original unit, it was a pretty basic multiple choice test.
It was all about memorization.
Right, just regurgitating facts.
Yeah, not very exciting.
But in the revised version,
Okay, how did they change it?
they had students design a 3-day healthy menu
Oh, wow.
for a summer camp.
That's so cool.
They have to apply everything they've learned.
It's like they're junior nutritionists.
Right, they're thinking about food groups, nutritional guidelines,
Yeah.
meal planning, even budgeting.
It's so real.
It's a real challenge.
And
It allows for so much creativity.
Yeah.
Some students might focus on making those meals kid-friendly.
Yeah,
Others might focus on using local, sustainable ingredients.
that's fantastic.
And the assessment is multifaceted.
Yeah.
You can look at the final product, the menu itself,
Okay.
but you can also observe them throughout the process.
So we're assessing those process skills as well.
How are they collaborating? How are they problem solving?
Yeah, I love
It's a
that.
much richer picture of their understanding.
This has been such a powerful illustration.
Yeah, it really shows how UBD can come to life.
Of UBD in action.
And it's not just about changing the content.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our whole approach to teaching and learning.
It's a mindset shift
It's about moving from coverage to understanding,
from passive to active.
from isolated facts to interconnected ideas.
You've really captured the essence of UBD.
And the best part is,
I love that. And I think what's so cool about this is that this nutrition unit
this is one example.
is just one example.
We can apply these principles to any subject, any grade level.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really a framework for thinking about learning.
So no matter what you teach, you
Exact.
can use this framework
It's all about asking those key questions.
to make it more
What do we want students to understand? How will we know they get it?
meaningful and engaging.
What experiences will get them there?
This deep dive has given me so much
I'm glad to hear that.
to think about.
It's exciting stuff, isn't it?
And so many practical ideas to try.
It can really make a difference in the classroom.
It's really reignited my passion
That's what it's all about.
for creating those
Inspiring those aha moments.
learning experiences for my students.
And as always,
And I think it's important to leave our listeners with
with something to ponder.
that final thought.
Right, so here's a question for y'all.
Okay.
How might you apply these principles of understanding by design
I like it.
to your own learning
To your own look.
or your professional development?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Think about it.
I think so often we get caught up in
We get caught up in the doing.
the
We
doing.
forget to step back and think about the why.
Right. And how are we actually learning?
Exactly.
What are we trying to get out of this?
And how can we design those experiences for ourselves?
Yes. This is a great talent.
To make our own learning more meaningful.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
It's been a pleasure.
into the world of understanding by design.
I always enjoy these conversations.
Me too.
It's so great to explore these ideas together.
Absolutely. And we hope you've gained
Yeah, hopefully everyone listening has something
some valuable insights today.
to take away and try out.
And are feeling inspired to design learning experiences that really spark that curiosity.
Spark that curiosity, foster deep understanding.
Foster that deep understanding and empower students to apply their learning
Empower them to take it beyond the classroom.
in meaningful ways.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.